بسیار به تصویری وجود میشه و در بی خودی ارتباط میگیره به این دوره لودویگ 14 که پدرش وقتی که 35 ساله می باشه پدرش فوت میکنه، مگرم مادرش و وزیر نخست وزیرشون کل کارها را به دست میگیره تا زمانی که سن 23 ساله میشه. سن 23 ساله که میشه موضوع وزیر اول فوت میکنه و قدرت به دست میگیره و کوشش میکنه که تمام امور در دستش باشه، تمام قدرت در صلاحیت خودش باشه و از مردم مالکیت میکنه. کوشش میکرد که بسیار یک گروهی قوی داشته باشه، قوی ترین گروهی را جور میکنه و همه چیز صلاحیت کل چیز به دست خود میگیره و هیچ کس حق اجازه نمیده که تصمیم بگیره. فیلم چی؟ نشر میکنه و چی هست؟ ترجمه میشه به زبان انگلیسی و خوش میکنم که ترجمه کنم. وقتی که قدرت باشه میخوایی قدرت نشان میدی و مردمان با قدرت در جای بود. مثلا قصر سفید یک پادشاه با قدرت است، زالون سینمای خود داره و زالون موزی میکنه تصف کنه. در روم هم 2000 سال پیش مردم سوال شد اما تو به خاطر قدرت خود نشان میدن قصرها آباد کردن و در فرانسه همچنان لودویگ 14 ساینس یک قصر آباد میکنه برای خود. یک قصر بسیار جالب مقبول برای خود آباد میکنه. این خودی که میگه قصر آباد از و در وسط مدرسه خودش هست. در فرانسه کمروی میکنه و نامش هم سونینگ اوتوب داره. یعنیش قسمت وسطی مرکزی رو به خود داشته و با قدرت خود نشان میده. تمام قدرت در دست خودش میباشه و هر چیزی که میگفت قانون بود. هیچ کس نبود که از او بتواند مقابله کنه و زیرا هیچ کس و عدم رسول قدرت تمام دست پادشاه بود. سال 1638 دولت میشه.
Nu werd hij koning van Frankrijk. De 14e naam. Maar Lodewijk was natuurlijk nog te jong om te regeren. Daarom deden de eerste minister en zijn moeder als vriendinnen. Het belangrijkste koninklijk paleis stond in Parijs. Lodewijk had hier geen gelukkige jeugd gehad. Voornaam redenen kwamen in opstand tegen het beleid van de eerste minister.
فیدالا در احتجاج به و خاطر از اینکه از وفاقی هم میگیره مگر موفق نمیشه. فیدالا را دیگه سرشان اعتبار نمیکنه و کوشش میکنه توجه ادوار جذب. 23 ساله میباشم از قریه به نام فرسای میره اونجا یک قصر رو میکنه 20 کیلومتر فاصله داره از شهر. جای خاص که رقص می‌داشتن. بسیار مقبول نمی‌باشد و آن فیدالا را هم دور خود جمع می‌کرد. صدها هنرمندان و مهندسان کار کردن به خاطر آبادی از قصر. در منزل اولش برای مکتب بودیم. استقبال مقصد خانه اتاق خوابش. میمونان آزادانه میتونستن داخلش بودن. برای هر کس میخواست نشان بده که چقدر قدرت داره و چقدر پول داره. از دربایی شهر بود همیشه باغ‌های مقبول جور کنه و بسیار خوش داشت با آبشار. وقتی که پادشاه دیگه می آمده همیشه این آبشار روشن میشه.
Het geld kon niet op. Deze hoeveel kamers er waren? Wel 700.
تقریبا دیگه
500 spiegels.
این 500 تا اتاق‌ها داشته و 200 تا آینه ها بوده و درخت‌های زیاد
Honderden paarden staan.
و از صدها تا قصرها.
Sommige gasten dachten dat ze al in het paleis waren aangekomen, maar dan waren ze pas in de paardenstad.
تو وقت ترانسپورت نبود یا اسب
goed in de gaten houden. En dit als we even niet opletten, zal direct de macht naar zich toe trekken.
و بسیار کوشش میکرد که کلگی در زیر نظر داشته باشه که اگر این قدرت از دستش نداره.
Honderden edelen moesten dus hun eigen kasteel verlaten en de opdracht aan het hof van de koning innemen.
صدها فیدالا و یاره دور خود جمع کرده بود و قصرهای خود نام کرده میامد و داخل بود توجه میکرد در قصر میخواست که قدرت تمام در دست خودش خلاقت و همیش جشن میگیره دانس بود محفلهای رقص وجود میگیره تا وقتهای شب محفلات ادام در مناسبات که ایش خوب میبود همیش در خانه اتاق اپارتمان میداد و همچنان اجازه داشتی که به پادشاه نام میخوره که یک سر میز بشید یا وقتی که به سفر میره پادشاه کیش میشه سفر شد مگر همه جالب و مقدر نمید ولی که باید قانون نظم اگر احیانا چیز اتفاق افتاد باید قصر اعلام میکرد همیش در باره که تبصره میکردن بسیار زیاد تا مقدر جالب نبوده در وقت شرایط یا جشن‌ها یا قدر نبود ترانسپورت نبود و به اون خاطر زیاد از عطاری این چیزا استفاده میکرد. مگرم باید فیلم دارد که باید میگم باید چیزی میکردن. و خیلی مورد لذت بودن از چیزای شیکی که اونجا بود. دهقانا بسیار مشکلات بودن بخاطر که باید مالیه میدن. دهقانا بسیار غریب بودن و گرسنگی داشتن. شهرها هم جای زندگی خوب نبود. شاید چیزا نمیخواست علاقه بگیره به ژاپن و بعضی مردم مالیت جمع میکرد و به این شکل یک بود 200 سال مستقیم و جنگ هایی که پیش می بودن هم و خود با قدرت داری اردو را در اینجا باید تا فرانسه را بزرگتر و قوی‌تر می‌سازد.
Krijgt u ook de Nederlandse Republiek aan. Zonder koning kon het niet uitstaan dat Nederlandse kooplieden over de hele wereld moeten Het paleis van Versailles was het centrum van de macht van de zonnekoning. Regelde hij zijn staatszaken.
از اینجا کنترل میکرد هر روز جلسه میکرد در مورد وزیران خود و کنترل مدیریت از اینجا پیش بود. و پول جمع‌آوری پول وظیفه کوبه برای وظیفه‌اش می‌باشد که از مردم مالیه جمع می‌کرد.
Maar het geld verdween als sneeuw voor de zon. De woning van de stad is al vaak in zicht.
به اکثرا خزانه خالی میشد و با کوشش میکرد از مردم مالیه جمع کنند. مردم ها باید به مردم با ایجاد مالیت کنند.
En de Franse edelen konden zij de schatkist niet vullen?
فیوندالا مالیه نمیدن و خودشان از خود معاف کردن و لودویک معاف کرده بود که ازشان شکایت ازشان نداشته باشد، پرابلم جور نکنه تا اینکه بالاخره پیر میشه اولادش فوت میکنه و یک نوازه خودش بازو رو انتخاب میکنه ولیعهد خود اولادش فوت میکنه.
Lodewijk XIV stierf in 1715 op zijn paleis in Versailles. De zonnekoning was 72 jaar koning van Frankrijk geweest. Hij had van Frankrijk een machtig land gemaakt. Maar Frankrijk was wel bijna failliet. De staatskas was
قدرت در این کشور فرانسه را جور میکنه و اقتصادش اگر مردم بسیار زیاد زندگیشان خراب بود بخاطر که پول خزانه را به اردو و به معیشت خود مصرف تا که باز خستگی میآید و پس جور میکنه. ایتالیا قصرهایی که آباد میکنن، کلیساهایی که آباد میکنن و مرور زمان جا آباد میکنن و مرورها هم حتی اوایل استادهای مارایی از ایتالیا میکنن و روسیه قصرهایی آباد میکنن. قصرها خودشان آمد میکنن ولی اوایل از ایتالیا میرن و جوانها را روان میکنن بر تحصیل در ایتالیا فرانسه. تا دوره‌ای که باز این سیستم دوام میکنه ولی آثاری بسیار بزرگی از اون زمان قصر آنجا میمونن، مثل فیلم کنش موزیم هست.
Our everyday lives, art that makes us pause to feel and think. Chief proponent of realism, Gustave Courbet, believed that painting should represent real and existing things. This was the driving force behind realism, one of the most important periods. This is are those that create familiar scenes on everyday lives, art that makes us pause to feel and think.
زبان انگلیسی است رو بس ترجمه کنم.
And existing things. This was the driving force behind realism, one of the most important periods in French art. This was a time of revolution, the time when both the French Revolution and Industrial Revolution spurred dramatic change across the world. The first seeds of realism, also referred to as naturalism, were sown soon after the Revolution of 1848, which included a wave of over 50 countries in Europe and Latin America. The French public's desire for more dramatic reforms manifested in the realist art and literature that would flourish from the 1840s until the 1880s. Realists were the first generation of artists to adopt a highly scientific perspective in their art. Three of the most influential thinkers were Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, and Auguste Comte. Charles Darwin introduced the idea of evolution and survival of the fittest, which came to be considered a justification for the extreme wealth inequality of the time. Karl Marx, whose response to extreme wealth disparity was equal distribution and increased worker rights under communist government. And Auguste Comte stressed the importance of positivism, focusing on understanding the relationship between cause and effect. In early times, religion, mythology, and philosophy were considered the highest truths. But during the mid and late 1880s, more than ever before, the world that people could see, touch, taste, hear, and feel was considered objective truth. The French Royal Academy, whose endorsement was significant for artists during this time, thought that good art should be beautiful, classically inspired, and in line with French morality. Realist artists challenged all these ideas by painting non-idealized, everyday scenes of middle-class and poor people of modern times. These themes were both a response to the over-idealization of the Romanticism and Neoclassicism that came before, and a reflection of new scientific worldview and concern for human rights. Realism brought the issues and lives of the working class to the forefront, painting a gritty picture of the harsh realities, as well as beautiful joys of normal, everyday lives. Realism in painting was an art of changing times. Realists abandoned classicism and romanticism, preferring to create compelling and socially critical pictures based on direct observations of the world around them. Common characteristics of realist art was a rejection of artistic theory rules, a break from religious and mythological themes, minimal idealization, social criticism, and a scientific lens. Realist art aimed to portray people and scenes as they really were. As the leader of the French realist movement, Gustave Courbet used rural and agrarian people from his native region, as well as scenes of nature on a monumental scale. At the Salon of Paris of 1849 and 1850, Courbet's brilliant examples of realist paintings took the nation by storm. In particular, the Stonebreakers and A Burial at Ornans have come to be regarded as groundbreaking painting, convention, and modern. The Stonebreakers shows the state of poor peasant workers during the Industrial Revolution. It reveals the hardships that miners, farmers, and peasants faced at the hands of factory owners and capitalists. The motionless faces and mellow colors are melancholic, while also informing us about the harsh realities faced by the working class. Courbet's honest, simplistic portrayal of day-to-day imagery was considered by critics as crude and even anti-authoritarian. Another example of Courbet's defiance of conventional art methods and perspectives is Young Woman from the Village, which was exhibited at the Salon of Paris in 1852. The painting featured three young girls, Courbet's sisters, dressed in countrified costumes and representing the rural middle class. They are seen giving money as charity to a poor cowherder. Critics panned this painting, calling it clumsy and tasteless. Despite continuous rejections from critics, Courbet continued undeterred. Artists Jean-François Millet and Honoré Daumier. Like Courbet, Jean-François Millet also faced initial criticism, but gained popularity in the 1860s. He is best known for his depictions of rural life, scenes of peasants at work in particular. Millet left his home in Paris to settle in Barbizon in 1849 in order to live in closer proximity to his rural subjects. His sheep shearing beneath a tree in crayon and watercolor is one of his many artworks on the subject of sheep shearing. One of his most emotional compositions, admired and copied by Van Gogh, is First Steps, depicts a father putting down his tools and stretching his arms out for his child's first steps, while the child's mother carefully guides her movements. Millet's most famous work, The Gleaners, depicts rural poverty through three peasant women gleaning grains. Bending over the ground, all three women have their eyes fixed firmly downwards. The scene portrays the hardships faced by peasant women, whose job was to go out into the fields at sunset and pick up ears of corn missed by the harvesters. Millet's portrayal was considered anti-authoritarian, but his conservative style was a far cry from Courbet's less restrained technique. Honoré Daumier was a well-known lithographer who had parodied King Louis Philippe in caricatures. Inspired by the realism movement, Daumier turned to more realistic portrayals later in his career. His The First Class Carriage and The Third Class Carriage portrayed the socio-economic distinctions of the time through his experiences traveling in different classes of rail coaches. Edouard Manet, another eminent realist, painted people in natural settings, as seen in the landscape of his painting Luncheon on the Grass. Artist John Sargent practiced his own form of realism, depicting human forms and his characteristic glimmers of light, as seen in Madame X. During the same time, the naturalist literature complemented the realist movement, pushing the working class into the realm of art and literature. Flaubert's Madame Bovary, Tolstoy's War and Peace, and Henry James's Portrait of a Lady were all three realist works still popular today. At the time, the harsh everyday realities in these novels shocked readers, but they also struck a powerful chord. Realist literature was characterized by simple plots and complex characters, social critique, matter-of-fact style, and a focus on the lives and daily struggles of lower and middle-class characters. Plays like Ibsen's A Dollhouse and Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard and Three Sisters were influential works in realist theater. The realist movement spawned two offshoots, the Barbizon School and the Ashcan School. The Barbizon School was comprised of French landscape painters in the town of Barbizon. The Ashcan School was in the United States and depicted gritty scenes from city life. Realism would go on to influence the work of young progressive artists and pave the way for Impressionism in the late 1800s.
تازه دیگه شروع میشه که اینطوری و میبینیم که سوژه ها دیگه تغییر میکنه. سوژه ها به مشکل
Is this painting you're looking at right now good or is it bad? What about this painting exhibited the same year? Is it better because it
یه دوره امپرسیونیسم شروع میشه. خب ببینیم فیلم.
or because it captures a fleeting moment recorded just as the artist witnessed it. Its brushwork more lively, colorful, and expressive. When Impressionist paintings are presented in museums today and sold for millions at auction, no one questions their legitimacy as works of art worthy of our attention and esteem. But when they were first exhibited in Paris in 1874, they were regarded as unfinished, slapdash, lowbrow, and renegade. With the way art history has since evolved, or in the view of some, devolved, how do we understand these pictures, whose original power lay in their ability to shock, especially when to contemporary eyes they look old and totally unradical? What remains of their power? Why should we look at them? And what do we see? This is the case for Impressionism. This new style didn't arrive out of the clear blue sky, but the paintings were often created under one. A hallmark of the art that would come to be known as Impressionist was that many were painted outside of the studio and in the world, or as the French say, en plein air. Unlike the slow studio-based approach that held sway at the annual salons of the French Royal Academy, whereby tonal gradations were gradually built up with layer upon layer of glazes, Impressionist works were frequently begun, if not completed entirely out of doors. These artists used smaller canvases that were easy to transport and finish quickly before the light or weather changed. Artists had been painting in the landscape for some time, like Dutch artists of the 17th century, and even more recently in England, where the likes of John Constable won admirers for his pictures of villages and countrysides, and J.M.W. Turner wowed with his highly dramatic and abstracted scenes from nature. In France, where Impressionism was brewing, painting in the landscape was an established practice, artists escaping Paris and political instability to observe nature and render it in a relatively lifelike manner. These artists also experimented with style and technique, trying out looser brushwork and brighter colors. But landscapes were considered to be genre painting, and less important in the eyes of the Academy, that more than nature valued the study of ancient Greek and Roman art. This was the kind of admired by the Academy, pulling from history, mythology, and religion. They didn't want to see regular people doing regular stuff. The so-called realists had already challenged the Academy's values by painting scenes from contemporary life, sometimes admitted to the salon and sometimes denied. Gustave Courbet built his own pavilion during the 1955 Paris World's Fair, circumventing the official juried exhibition, and showing this painting where, it's worth noting, the focus is on a landscape painter. In 1863, the state organized a special exhibition to feature the works rejected by the salon, including challengers to the status quo who wanted to paint their own way and show the here and now, like Edouard Manet, who would not go on to show with the Impressionists, but was less friends with them, endorsed their work, and shared numerous interest techniques. The artists who participated in the first Impressionist exhibition in 1874 had shown their art within the salon and also grown tired of having their work rejected from it, so they put together their own show in the former studio of the photographer Nadar, calling themselves the Anonymous Society of Painters, Sculptors, Printmakers, etc. There was no state involvement, no jury, no hierarchical subject matter. They were each exploring their own concerns, not working toward any shared mission or manifesto. If there had been a manifesto, it could have only read something like, not the salon, or want to do my own thing things. But in general, I'd say this group was mostly painting for modern life, cityscapes and landscapes, using a brighter palette of colors, broken brushstrokes, and loosely defined forms that gave the works an air of spontaneity. So much so that art critic Louis Leroy commented on the accuracy of the title of one of Claude Monet's paintings on display, Impression Sunrise. To Leroy, it was merely an impression, a slight sketch unsuitable for display or sale. He dubbed the show Exhibition of the Impressionists as an insult, but another critic recast the theme in a positive light, saying of the new work, captivating. What a rapid grasp of the object, and what an amused turn. It's summary, agreed, but how spot on the marks are. As you know, the name stuck, and the artist came around too. Impressionist landscapes, unlike those that came before, often betrayed their place in time, showing city folk in the latest fashions or enjoying leisure activities in the Paris suburbs. New railway lines had made travel out of the city easier than ever, and the Impressionists were unafraid to show signs of this new way of life, and also of the increased industrialization around them. Life was getting faster, and it followed that art did too. Paris had changed enormously in the preceding decades, having undergone wholesale renovation beginning in the 1850s. A crowded medieval city had been merged one that was much more open, cleaner, and safer, with wide boulevards, public gardens, and lots of light. And the Impressionists did love their light, trying again and again to arrest its ephemeral effects. They liked to show it broken by clouds, dappled and filtering through trees, and especially as it reflects on water. Even when painting interiors, which they did indeed do, they loved to include a window, often with sheer drapes through which light could filter. Because they were often capturing atmospheric effects that would change with the passing minutes, the paintings have the feel of improvisation, even if they took a while to get just right. Monet often worked on several canvases at once, shuffling to different works as the light changed, or returning to the same spot daily to patiently await the return of the desired conditions. New and brighter pigments had recently become available, which the Impressionists put to good use, juxtaposing vivid colors in ways that were startling to audiences at the time. Even shadows, it turned out, didn't have to be just black or brown or gray. Studies on color that had been published in 1839 by chemist Michel-Eugène Chevreul had a hand in this experimentation, providing a guide for how complementary colors could be shown side by side to appear more vibrant and intense. An early review asserted these artists were painting things not just as they are, but just as they appear to be. And this was the revelation of Impressionism. To paint trees, one need not understand their structure, that they're composed of wooden trunks with branches and leaves extending out. One need only lay down rough smudges of greenish-brown to approximate the visual sensation the forms give off from a particular distance, as the light hits them in a certain way. You don't even need to know that they are trees. The artist could be an alien recently arrived on planet Earth, who knows nothing of the objects before them. That makes a record of the visual stimuli they perceive nonetheless, assuming this alien has some sort of eyes, of course. But not all Impressionists painted like that. Edgar Degas was a master draftsman, using strong lines to delineate forms, often human ones, with clear expertise. His innovation came in his unexpected compositions, showing subjects off-center, from oblique angles, or closely cropped. The popularity of Japanese art at the time can be seen in many Impressionist works through their flattening of forms and use of open space. The arrival of photography had also revealed new ways of framing images, suggesting the possibility of unbalanced, snapshot-like compositions, long before cameras would reach snapshot size and speed. Some have theorized that now that photography can capture reality well, painting was then freed from the shackle of realism and could do what paint does best, which is being colorful and tactile and, painty. This new kind of art also involved more women and represented them in new ways. Berthe Morisot participated in all but one of the Impressionist exhibitions and gave us remarkable views into the domestic sphere and lives of well-to-do women. Mary Cassatt joined the ranks as well and became known for depicting women and children as well as her own family. Women in a variety of classes were subjects for the Impressionists, and not just nude and lying on a bed anymore, but shown doing the things they actually do, home as well as out in the world, enjoying Paris nightlife, and also being it. A population boom following the Franco-Prussian War had brought about a new mixing of genders and social classes, which we see unfolding in Impressionist depictions of street life, culture, and various forms of entertainment. The membership of this motley crew of artists fluctuated with each exhibition, including names you've definitely heard of as well as ones you probably haven't. By their last exhibition in 1886, few of the artists were working in a style you'd likely identify as Impressionist. Core members had evolved their own styles and were exhibiting independently, and the artists we now consider neo-Impressionists had arrived, like Georges Seurat and Paul Signac, who were interested in the more scientific aspects of color and how our eyes process it. What we call Impressionism had reared its head as well in the form of the young Paul Paul Gauguin. By 1886, Impressionism had become a global tendency, with artists around the world exploring similar techniques and styles and subject matter. That Impressionism as a word exists owes a credit to the concurrent expansion of the popular press, the first art movement with a name to be covered widely, with reviews ranging from complimentary to openly hostile. The art market had recently strengthened as well, bolstered by a stronger French economy, and a new category of collector interested in apartment-scale pictures rather than castle or cathedral-scale ones. Art dealer Paul Johann Ruel was a primary force behind selling the Impressionist works, both in Europe and America, where the paintings were snapped up and eventually gifted to the museums where many are still held today. It was a newly common practice among dealers to encourage their artists to find their own niche in the market, each to peddle their own singular vision. And it's that singular subjective vision that Impressionism has come to embody. What these artists were able to capture, and what still enthralls us, is not the world as you see it, or as a large crowd might, but the world as only they see it. It's why their last names hold power, evoke strong associations, sell for millions at auction, and draw crowds. When you look at an Impressionist work, you're aware that a person stood before the canvas, applying the paint mark by mark, from their own particular viewpoint, and in their own distinct manner. In it, we can see the beginnings of the cult of the individual that has since taken hold, inklings of the now widespread thirst to share our everyday views of the world, each from our own angles and in our own styles. Impressionism was one of the first of a string of avant-garde art movements, each rejecting tradition and embracing the modern, promoting new ideas about what art could be and what it could do. Whether or not you're familiar with the succession of isms that followed, you already know the narrative. Students learn from their teachers, but then repeat their lessons and push on forge their own paths. Novel methods over time lose their ability. New ideas replace old, and the cycle continues. And now it's gotten even faster. An 1874 review of the first Impressionist exhibition posed the question, is the absence of rules a good thing? Only the future will enlighten us. And enlighten us it has, demonstrating the breadth of what the pursuit of singular vision can bring forth. But the best case for Impressionism is the art itself. In a museum filled with the dark and dramatic art that preceded it, and the often confounding art that follows, Impressionism is really pleasant. It's not violent or distressing or sentimental or moralistic. It's recognizable subject, rendered in an interesting but not overtly challenging by contemporary standards kind of way. It's an optical delight, giving us windows into a fascinating historical moment, created by supremely talented artists who pushed art in new directions to better represent that moment and their own view of it. And that is enough. Thanks to all of our patrons for supporting the art assignment, especially our grandmasters of the arts, Vincent Appa, John Thomas, and Ernest Wolf.
این بود تا دوره امپرسیونیسم. تمام نمیشه هنوزم های دیگه باقی موندن. من کوشش کردم که یک مقدار مکتب هنری گرفته تا تاثیرات ریالیزم و امپرسیونیسم و رومانتیک هم کم کم از بعد از رومانتیک هم امپرسیونیسم میاد. با خاطر بود که من کوشش کردم که یک ارتباط بتونم و دوره صورتی همون لودویگ 14 un po' dello storia di giorno ma non esattamente simile خب خسته کن تمام نشد که واقعا دارم میتونم تقلید کنم ببینم فعلا برای باز ختم میکنم باز دفعه دیگه هنوز مانده مهمانش رو بخیرم که تقلید کردم خود داشت من برو زمان خواست پیش میریم فعلا خدا حافظ حتی سلامت باشی.